Okay, we're going to get started. It is 1 o'clock and we only have until 2, so we've got a lot to cover in a short period of time. I'm going to make sure that you all know that you have access to all the materials. If you've just signed on and you didn't see the link because you don't have access to what we just posted, you'll have access to it all when we're done and where to retrieve that, so that you don't need to worry about it. So this is about high school PBIS. Whoops, I'm not the one moving the slides. I just tried to move the slide and it didn't work. We are going to record this. These webinars are being hosted by the California PBIS Coalition. They're sponsoring those, and then each of the California PBIS Coalition is a coalition of the different technical assistance centers across California. And the California PBIS Center is the one who's doing the presentation today. That's the CalTAC PBIS. So we are part of the coalition. And I'm going to introduce ourselves. I am Barbara Kelly. And one of the things that we know is that during this time of social isolation, it's really important that we try to work on de-stressing ourselves. And so the way that Patty and I are going to introduce ourselves to you is tell you what we're currently doing to add to de-stressing our lives. What I'm doing is I've started working from home. So I do take time to relax, but I'm finding that getting on my computer, doing these kinds of things is helping me relax and stay connected with my friends and colleagues. And Patty Hirschfeld is with me today, and she's going to introduce herself and what she's doing to relax.
Hi, like Barb said, I'm Patty Hirschfeld. I'm with the Center for Social Behavior Support, and we are an affiliate of the National PBIS Center. And I'm practicing or working on relaxing, and I'm practicing saying no sometimes to requests that are made. So that's how I'm helping time pass.
All right, so let's not forget we all have to take care of ourselves as well as taking care of all of our students and their families. So we want to make sure that everyone's familiar with. I'm thinking most people are by now. And we want to make sure that when you join, please keep yourselves muted. And then also making sure you know that we are videotaping this. So if you're going to not hide your camera, make sure you're, video ready. We are not going to use the hand raising option. We are going to be using the chat room. So between Patty and I, as we talk about PBIS in high schools, one of us is also going to be watching the chat room so that we can keep up with what's going on. That'll be how we communicate with each other. So if you would, make sure you've opened your chat box. And if you don't know how to do that, just, well, I don't know what to tell you. You can't chat to me and tell me you can't do it. You could unmute yourself if something like that happens. There are 97 of us on the call at this point, and we have 190 signed up. So we have to be careful about opening our communication other than the chat box. But you'll find it down on the bottom of your screen. If you haven't been using Zoom, hover around the bottom, there'll be a bar come up, and one of those will say chat. Just click on it and then move your box over to the right. That way you can write in it. And after you make your message, you just hit enter and it will pop up for everybody to see because they're going to everyone. So this session is being recorded, just to remind you of that. You will be able to get a copy of this. It's going to be posted within the next couple of days on the PBISCalifornia.org website. That slide was actually to remind me to turn it on, but I have already turned it on.
You already did, Barb. You're on top of it.
I'm on top of it. So now let's talk about what we want to get done today.
So the learning intentions for our time together are to explore, to learn about some existing high school specific resources. And those of you who are implementing in high school, I'm hopeful that you'll be surprised and amazed by just the plethora of resources that are available to support you with your efforts. We're going to talk a little bit also about contextual influences and how that impacts your PBIS implementation. Now we will give you a little bit of information, and then we'll go into a breakout room and allow you to talk with some of your fellow webinarians and thinking about context and how that might be influencing what your work looks like. And then reflecting on that impact, in the breakout room.
So we're lucky we get to go to the breakout rooms twice today. And our big thing now is we're trying to see if that means that we go back with the same people. So we think that happened last time, but we're going to give it a roll again today. So with our expectations, these are the ones we've been using. We added a new one, but we want to make sure we're respectful, and that's by keeping ourselves on mute and using the chat box whenever we want to ask and answer questions, any kind of prompts. We want to be kind, and that's where we really want to make sure that we're thoughtful of all the people in our communities, because as we know, COVID knows no boundaries, and there are certain subgroups that are affected more significantly, disproportionately, than others. So being kind is something that we want to be paying attention to. Be safe. Continue to be safe and stay at home using our distancing protocols. So using these Zoom and Rs, while they're not the best for me, because I like to see people in the eye when I'm talking to them, it is something that's working for us. So we'll have to keep our physical distancing up. We want to be responsible, so increase our social emotional connections more than ever. That's why we're going to go to 2 breakout room opportunities in this session. This will be a first. So we're going to see how we manage doing 2 of them in one 60-minute period.
Just to kind of briefly give you some data, and these data are a little bit old, and I can tell you why in just a second, but this is data that had been tracked since 2012, specific to the number of high schools in the United States who are implementing PBIS. The break in the data is simply because after 2018, the measure was changed. They were looking at high schools who are implementing with said fidelity. So that data point's not captured on here, but you can see there's, this 3 years ago, already 3,367 schools were implementing PBIS, high schools. And I think Barb will contribute to that number here.
Yeah, so in California, we have almost 4,000 high schools, 3,892 high schools. And so you can see the growth for us from 2014-15. And I really should have gone back and picked up starting in 2012, because that's when it started. There were 1 or 2 schools starting in 2001, and then it just dwindled up. But all of a sudden, it really took off about 2012 for high schools in California. So you can see we have a steady growth in California. However, we are still only 12% of the high schools in California. So we really want to, while we have a big number compared to a lot of states in high school, and we're kind of leading the charge in many places, it really only is a small percentage of our schools still. We're going to show you a video, and the question was asked, what impact is PBIS having on your school? And this was taken at the California High School PBIS Symposium. It happened this last February in Long Beach. If you haven't been to that yet, it's something that you really want to keep in mind, and we're going to show you a save the date at the end of the slide. It's something just for high schools, and this was an outstanding video done by a gal who soon is going to be a director in cinematography. So it's Patty's daughter, high school kids, and they were the ones that videotaped several interviews. And this was one interview that was a question about the impact on your school.
And I apologize, there's a little bit of background noise, but hang with us. The message is really powerful.
So PBIS has really created deep connections and relationships between students and teachers, and maybe those students ordinarily wouldn't have had that adult connection. PBIS has impacted our school by having like a consistent framework for all of our classes of 3 things that we want to see happen: be kind, respectful, responsible.
And I'm the PBIS lead, so I have a team that gets together every month, and we make decisions about our campus and about our positive behavior system of support, and then also on behavior.
I've seen people go from kind of this lower level of just comfort with adults in general. They don't really want to, students don't really want to interact with adults. So now it seems like that comfort level's higher, and people are more willing to engage their problems in their actual real life instead of just that fake life that they want to give to us.
And at my school site, it's really helped teachers and students to understand that there's more to being at school than just the academics. It's how you develop as a person, how you learn to deal with different things, and do it in like a positive way.
It really has improved the school culture. It's got a lot of buy-in from the teachers in that they see that we're providing more supports for students. We're encouraging positive behavior rather than just being punitive.
Well, PBIS affected our school. It changed the dynamic of how the kids see us as teachers, and also helping them to resolve conflict issues, conflict resolutions, and providing them a space to excel, also talk about things that are bothering them.
Our acronym is STRONG, so it's supportive, together, resilient, outgoing, noteworthy, and generous.
And we have matrices all around campus for how it looks in different areas. So how are you going to be kind, respectful, responsible in the cafeteria, in the hallways, in the locker rooms? And I think it just provides like a consistent language for our students to have and our staff to use as well.
It's helping to create a culture that can help kids, other students on campus.
It's an alternative to suspension also. So instead of getting suspended from school, we allow them to talk about it,
called
get
today,
back into their
see
classroom.
if she was going to be coming to school there next year. Mhm. Well, he didn't call me, he called Shannon.
So I'm wondering if Melanie, we're hearing your audio. Could you go ahead and mute? And Barb, I'll let you continue. Sorry.
That's okay. So what we'd like to have you do is take advantage now of the chat room. I see somebody did go to the symposium last year and they loved it. I did too. It's really great. So we'd like you to, in your chat room now, have a conversation. What or how has PBIS impacted your school climate? The things that you've noticed at your school. So we're just going to take a minute. Anybody that can think of it, throw in an idea about how PBIS has impacted your school climate.
And post that in the chat box.
It's a good opportunity for everybody to practice chatting. While you're chatting, I did put a chat box in there that gave you the URL or the link to where you can find those videos. There's actually 3 of them, 3 different questions, and they're great. They run really well. I think it was just because we're using it in Zoom that they didn't run as well. Consistency across the school. How great is that for high school, that we're all using the same language, involving the kids? Those are some of the things that I'm seeing. And I've got one here, still building Tier 1 at our school. So I started implementing PBIS in high school in 2001. They're still building Tier 1. I don't think Tier 1 ever goes away. You're constantly changing and updating it with all the kids. Okay, well, we can continue with this conversation throughout. So whenever you think of something you want to throw in the chat room, go right ahead and do that. And we're going to move on. We're going to take a tour of the PBIS.org website, particularly for high school. This is part of the resources that Patty was talking about that we're going to be able to have for you. So at the PBIS.org website, you can see the URL. I'll get it posted in just a minute in the chat box.
Can you see my internet? Sorry.
I can, yes, we can see your internet. So you don't need to go there, but we'll get it posted as soon as we're done with this little tour. So when you go to PBIS.org and you click on resources, and then you'll go down topics to high school, click on high school, and this is the page that you see. So you can see you've got examples, which the website just got redesigned and up, and I'm not sure there's examples in there yet, but keep checking. There's materials to use, there's different presentations, publications, and videos. We're going to take a look at some of those publications just briefly so that you'll know what actually is there, see the list of them. The one is about using data for multi-tiered behavior supports in high schools, which is really PBIS. And it's taking a look at the 4 different types of outcome data. How do you take a look at attendance, behavior, course performance, and school climate? So how do you become a database decision-making team that looks at that data in order to determine what it is that you need to do next at your school? So it's how do you have access to that data? How do you do goal setting around that data? And then really importantly, how do you share that data with stakeholders? Everybody's always talking about buy-in and sustainability, and that sharing your data with stakeholders is a really big piece of that. You'll see the next one there is about student voice. And this is an article, not more than an article, it's a brief about how you engage the young people in order to increase the sustainability at your school. This is one of the big differences in implementing PBIS in high school, is really about how important it is that you implement student voice, that they take a really strong role in the leadership with what we're working on. It's developmentally really necessary. And in high school, you really can't do PBIS without the kids. The next one you see down there is about staff buy-in. And the buy-in, that particular brief is going to talk about the barriers that we run across in high schools, strategies for how you secure buy-in in order to do the implementation. And then after you secure it, how do you maintain it? And then how do you go about with the data sharing and communication, what role that plays? I already mentioned that in the buy-in. So that's just a few of the briefs that you will find in that section. So you have a lot of good research now specific to high school that's going to be able to help you out. In there, you're also going to find, and Patty's going to talk to you about these 2 monographs that happened in 2009 and then in 2018. So that's where the full monographs are, because you're going to want those. Okay,
And
so
the three briefs that Barbara mentioned were actually written from data that were collected interviewing folks who had coached high schools. So those are really from the field, if you will, really authentically represent what people are sharing with TA providers. There's also a brief soon to come on acknowledgements in high school, which I know is a really important topic. There's a little bit of a backup, the Department of Ed right now, and that's where we get our materials vetted. So obviously, given the current situation. So be on the lookout for that. I suspect it'll be, maybe another month or 2, but keep your eye out for that.
So you'll notice in the chat box, I just posted the URL for getting to this high school section at the PBIS.org website, because it's a big website. So it's good to have where to go find specific high school.
So Barb mentioned there are 2 monographs that are written to support high school implementation. The original one was written in 2009, and the chapters that you can hopefully see those include, just an introduction. The role of the administrator is the focus of chapter 2, establishing and maintaining staff participation. And there are some strategies in there, but really taking into account how critical staff participation is.
Mommy, you said
Number,
was to come to you because Amy went on my journal thing.
Barb, you can mute everybody.
The purple thing? Amy wrote.
Okay.
Off.
The 4th chapter is connecting school-wide PBIS to academic curriculum, which, obviously very important for high school. I would say that's a huge one of those areas that can just provide a lot of support for teacher buy-in when we help draw the connection between academic and behavior. And so the chapter speaks a little bit about that. Database decision-making, and then secondary and tertiary supports. So as I said, this was written in 2009. And then in 2018, we kind of put our heads together thinking about how we might revise the first monograph. And what we landed on was that these are all still very relevant. And so we kind of took a stab at furthering the topics. And so the 2018 monograph that was put out considered context and foundational systems, which we're going to explore that a little bit in a little bit greater detail here in a second. Paying attention to district support and some nuances that go along with high school implementation and district support. And I think one of the coolest things we learned was that oftentimes, because high schools are the last to implement in a district, that a lot of those infrastructures are already in place. And so I think that was kind of an interesting finding. There's a chapter on coaching. And again, these are all high school specific. PBIS and College and Career Ready, and Jen Freeman did a great job on leading that work. A chapter dedicated to freshman support. And so how do we go about helping our freshmen with that transition to high school? There's just a ton of research that tells us that's what we need to be doing in order to ensure their success or optimize it. There's a chapter on youth voice, and then safe and supportive environments. And in this chapter, it's an equity focus, but there's some good examples and information around supporting our students identifying LGBTQT. So that's a great chapter to pay attention to. We, when you have this PowerPoint, these are live links that go directly to the documents themselves. But as Barbara toured us through the website, you saw where those appeared in publications. So recognizing you're not going to speed read this right this minute, we're going to ask you, however, and we're going to put you in some breakout rooms and ask you to talk with your fellow room colleagues about thinking about these chapters, to reflect on your school's implementation efforts. Where are you with implementation? What are some things that might surface within your own school culture? And in reviewing these chapter titles, do any of these really speak to you, to something that might be supportive for you at your school? And if so, why? So kind of 3 questions to think about. And what Barb has done is she has listed in the chat box the chapters, because when we go to our breakout rooms, we won't be able to access that. You won't be able to see this slide. So in a second, we're going to put you in the breakout rooms, ask that you introduce yourself to your colleagues, and then have the, review these questions, talk with one another about these chapters, and why they might be helpful in your school. And I think we're going to give you 10 minutes, and Barb will give us a 1-minute warning before we bring you all back to the main Zoom room.
So I don't know if you've been in, oh, my breakout room is gone. Found it. I don't know if you've been in breakout rooms before. It moved to a different place. But when you get there, as Patty said, you won't be able to see the screen any longer. You'll be on your own. But look in the chat and have your conversations about those areas. So it'll just take a minute. Oh, be sure that when you get invited, that you accept and come in the room. You do have to do that. You can't just sit there and wait and it's going to happen automatically for you. So you're invited and you go for it. So let me make the rooms right now. We should have about 4 to 5 participants in each room. Nobody's joining. Oh, here we go, a join. Oh, they're joining. Patty, are you with me?
I am with you, and some are other also, I think.
Still here? Be sure you hit join. Everybody's gotten an invitation. We got 1 person in room 3 at this point.
I was there. Can you move that person to another room?
This one?
Whoever's in number 3. I can't see what you see.
Okay. Melissa Campos is coming too, so I'm going to move her to 2.
I didn't look at the time.
I'm just telling people if they end up in a room by themselves, chat me and I'll move them. It's amazing how this works.
I'm going to do a training tomorrow or Thursday with the school system.
Uh-huh.
So I'll have to figure out how to allow each lead in each breakout room to share their screen so their principal can.
Cynthia Juarez, I need to find out what room she was in.
Hey, I was in breakout room 14.
14, you want me to move you?
Yes, I was all alone.
Yeah.
Aw, we're sorry.
14, so I'm going to move you, and Melanie wants help too, so hold on a minute.
At Norwalk High School.
Okay.
And my middle school site is still in the process. I recently sent out an email. I believe it's Lakeside Middle School. It's in the Lakeside Unified School District.
Okay.
Kind of nearby Downey, Santa Fe Springs, around that.
Got
What
it.
about yourself? Are you also a fellow counselor or administrator? Or?
I'm Barb, you're muted.
All right. I don't think I moved somebody that needed to move out of a breakout room. I went to the wrong.
My name's Jeanette. I don't know if you could tell who I am, but I couldn't get into I was the only one there. So I'm a little.
What room were you in? Do you know?
It said 14.
Okay. Are you Janan?
Yes. You said it right.
I'm going to move you.
Okay, well, I'm seeing a lot of people say they were alone.
Oh, dear. They shouldn't be alone.
Breakout room.
I'm going to move you to 12.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Esperanza Guzman. I am not in a room. I went somewhere and I was alone.
Do you know what room you were in?
I think it was 11.
All right, let me see if I can find you. I see you. All right, I'm going to move you to 12.
Okay.
All right, there you go. Whoops.
Looks like Marcos was also alone.
Well, 11 is asking for help too. So did I get you moved?
I didn't get moved.
All right, I think at the same time something else happened. Okay, I'm moving it. And now you go ahead and accept it.
Okay, but 11's going to be.
I think nothing popped up this time for me to accept. Last time it did.
And that's Esperanza?
No, it was Janan.
Oh, Janan, it didn't happen, huh? Let me find you.
Yeah. I'm sorry making this difficult.
Oh, that's all right, because then you'll be set for the next time.
Yeah.
See, I lost you. Now I have to find you. There you are. Okay, so there's 3 other people in 12. I'm going to send it. Oh, 12 is, I can't send you to 12 again.
Okay.
Let's try 13. There's 2 people there.
Okay.
Mine shows Esperanza in 12 with 2 other people.
I think when everybody comes back, we'll remind them to, it might take 20 seconds or so for it to happen.
Right, I need to give it a moment.
But if not, you probably need to just be prepared to stick people in not stick them, move people to rooms, especially out of that one that was empty. Like, see, there have been 4 people that said they were alone in 16.
But then they got joined and I moved people out. So we need to give it a minute to fill
Yeah.
out. I think. Let's see.
We're also
got 2 people unassigned. I'm going to try to assign them.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's happened is they're jumping around a little bit.
I don't know if they can move themselves though.
They can unjoin.
Oh.
Nine. So anybody who might be in the main room, if you want to unmute and let me know, I'll see about putting you in a room so you're ready for the next time we do this.
Hi.
Hi.
I still not be able to get into any room.
Okay, let me see. You shouldn't be able to. You have to get invited. So let me find you.
I was in 8 just now,
You
but
were?
yeah, I was by myself.
Okay. There's 2 people in 8, so I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
You were in there by yourself?
Yeah, when I joined in.
I'm going to put you in another room, but there are 2 people in that room now, so maybe it was just a matter of waiting for them. I'll put you in 9.
Okay.
That works.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes? You still
I
didn't
was, yeah, I was also in, I was in 16, but I was in there by myself and I waited for, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 minutes before I rejoined the main page.
Is this Angela?
No, this is Dana.
Dana. Yeah, there's supposed to be 3 people in there. I'm going to drop in. Hold on a minute and let me drop in there. Okay, Dana?
Okay.
TSS or whatever that looks like to deal with when those teachers have a hard time with PBIS because of whatever past experiences that they've had, you know? So, hi, Barb.
Hi, guys. I was just dropping in because somebody else was in there with you and they said they couldn't find you. And I said, no, I know they're there. So I'm going to drop back out again. Good to see you.
Okay, you too, Barb. Sorry.
Conversation going.
Okay, it's going good.
Since you're in the room with us, we'll talk to you.
Okay, perfect. Honestly, I joined or I signed up for this webinar because I work in after school, but I work with mainly 7th and 8th graders.
Uh-huh.
So my objective is to get them engaged in more student leadership and voice. So when they do get to high school, if PBIS isn't implemented in their high school, that they can, you know, kind of speak up to it and introduce it or the idea of it to whoever it needs to be introduced to.
That's some good forward thinking.
Yeah. Trying.
For sure.
Get creative when you have a lot of time to think.
I know. It's a blessing and a curse for sure.
Yes.
We have about 49 seconds left. You guys don't, I don't know if you have the clock in the main room, but I'm closing it up now.
No, Dana and I were talking since we couldn't get her in the room. So
I don't know what happened because I went into the room. There were people there. I said hi and then I popped back out again.
Interesting.
I know.
And Dana, you know, as we share the materials here, even though they're high school, they're definitely make sense for middle school. I should say that to the whole group, actually.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it.
Okay. So yeah, my plan is to take this information back to my supervisor because we have a staff meeting tomorrow to see, if it's okay, once we do either get back on campus or start with our virtual after school activities, if this is something I can kind of introduce to the kids at the high school level. We do it at the middle school level and it almost seems to be the same, but just kind of take that further step with it on the high school level.
Yeah.
Okay, Patty, I think everybody should be back with us.
Okay, if we could, one, ask you to put your computer back on mute, and I didn't pre-correct for this very well. If one or two of you from your group could just post in the chat some of, what chapters did you identify with, maybe how could you use these monographs. And when we proposed this idea about sharing resources, we've had schools kind of adopt a chapter and almost do like a PLC or a book study around it. So that was kind of our thinking in terms of sharing this. We had some breakdown with the breakout sessions, and Barb, you might need to jump in because I don't see that side of the screen. So we're gonna go on with a little more content, and when we finish, we're gonna try the breakout rooms again. And so if you're placed in one, just hang out there for a little bit and see if anyone shows up, and we can pop in to see who's where.
And I think that it might take a little bit of time, although a few people said they waited a while. I don't know if it's the fact that we have so many people, we're making 22 breakout rooms, but I can see who's been put where, and there were people supposed to show in each one of them. So again, we want to make sure that you hit the accept button. Some people had some difficulty with being able to leave and their computers freezing, things like that. So I think we'll put more people in fewer rooms. That was a great suggestion. And that Jade made, and we'll try that and see how it works for our next one. But we're going to get going or we're not going to have time.
Okay. And so thanks for the information and your thoughts in the chat. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive into chapter 2, which is in the newest monograph about context and foundational systems. And I do a good amount of work with high schools nationally, and I feel strongly about this piece of information, this chapter in and of itself, and how much understanding context can have an impact on your implementation in a high school. So I'm going to very quickly go through a model that was kind of adapted from the paper that Bridget Flannery and Mimi Cato wrote in 2012, and again is shortened in chapter 2 of that monograph. But essentially it's this notion that in high schools, we often have much more of an academic focus. I like to say we have a deadline across the floor in 4. And so kind of starting with the end in mind is a lot of times that's how we would approach implementation initially with respect to high schools. I also like to say that things can be different because there are things, and we'll look at those things in a second. There are aspects about high school implementation that requires to do things differently. However, there are those features, those core features that we absolutely need to do, that need to be the same, because PBIS is an evidence-based practice, and that evidence base was established through the identification of core features. And so certainly we can approach implementation differently, but the sameness needs to be in adherence with some of those features. So when we think about context, I want to talk about these contextual influences here on the left column, and those being size, culture, and developmental level. And we'll take a little bit of a closer look at each of the 3 of those. The key foundational systems that we need to be mindful of include data, and oftentimes with high school, and I want to honor the fact when I'm saying size, and that I'm not necessarily talking about the numbers, so hang with me on that. But in high school, inevitably, regardless of the size of the population, we have typically far more data to look at. And so that becomes a consideration with implementation. A lot of times we have more administrators. So I know of a high school in Arkansas that has 16 assistant principals. again, that is a larger high school, but it's no longer about the team communicating with just the principal and assistant principal. There's a team of leaders in that building that need to be aware of and bought into this work. And then communication is probably one of the biggest challenges, and that is about how do you get the word out to all staff. So those are the foundational systems, but let's look at these contextual influences. And first, talking about size. And again, certainly I have larger number of students. That's not to say all high schools are large, but they're oftentimes and most of the time larger than the elementary and middle schools that feed them typically. And so that is still a consideration, even if you're thinking about a high school that's, you know, small in numbers for students. But also be thinking about size in terms of the multiple resources that students have access to and are in place to support our high school students. For instance, people. There are far more people involved in the lives of a high school student than there are typically in elementary and middle. And that can include the community as kids are out in the workplace. They have more options, more course options, and that, while that's a super valuable and wonderful thing, we need to be supportive in making sure that our students are on track and making the right choices. And oftentimes that falls on the counseling office, and oftentimes counselor student ratios are quite huge. So just be thinking about how size in these contexts could be a huge consideration. And again, we have a lot of student supports going on. Also want to mention departments and divisions. People would argue that we live in silo in high schools, and I would argue that can be as much of a strength as a challenge. And it's an organizational structure that's built in order to communicate across the staff. Culture, when we talk about culture, I'm talking more specifically about maybe the philosophical mindset typical in high schools, as well as training for high school teachers. I was a high school teacher for 15 years, and I was trained in the pedagogy and content that I administered. And that's very different than when you come into a high school teacher's classroom and say, now I want you to teach social emotional lessons. And so understanding that. The other philosophy that kind of permeates high schools, and this is distance learning, so I can say this, sometimes high school educators think in terms of there being another place for our students to go in the event they, in a behavioral way, don't cut the mustard at our school, right? So thinking about in those terms for culture. And then finally, and I would argue most significantly, are the considerations around developmental level. So we have students who are 14 and students who are 19 and beyond in our school buildings. And there are vast differences developmentally in those age ranges. Our freshmen and sophomores need to learn to do school. Our juniors and seniors need to learn to do life. And so that's differentiation at its finest. Thinking about technology, these kids are digital natives. They wouldn't be struggling with the breakout rooms like Barb and I are. But so that's a gift to us as educators if we allow it to be a gift. So while we swear off the cell phones, they have an ability that we can really capitalize on. And as Barb said earlier, and our leader, Rob Horner, has said out loud in public, you cannot do this work in high schools without students involved. And so I ask you to really, really consider what that might look like. So we have for you in the folder that Barb gave a link to, this set of questions, and this might be a tiny bit confusing, but there are questions for size, culture, and developmental level, each of those three. And the questions are divided for school-based teams, but also there's a column for districts. And then below here on the bottom are some resources specific to some of what we discussed here in the questions. So we're going to ask you now, and I understand you haven't had a chance to digest this, or maybe you've seen this many times, but I like to think of this tool as a resource as perhaps you're implementing and you've hit some roadblocks and you need some thoughts or some guiding questions to help you problem solve. So we're going to ask, hopefully we get back into these breakout rooms effectively, and ask you to talk about how might any of these contextual considerations be impacting PBIS implementation at your school. So what, if anything, in that really fast overview I gave you might have stood out? So Barb?
Yeah, and so I'm going to recreate. You won't go back where you were because we're going to try to do this in fewer rooms. And I'm going to create just 10 rooms. And that'll be 7 to 8 people per room then. So be sure to accept and move in. In the text box, you'll see just a reminder. We want you to talk about those contextual influences of size, culture, and developmental level. Don't worry if you don't have all of the materials. Talk from your experience. And we'll have about 8 minutes in the rooms. They're creating now.
Hello.
Barbara, I don't think they created.
Oh, they didn't create because I didn't hit the open button. So if they'll all be creating. I made them, I just didn't open them. I was much better at this the very first time.
We're doing fine.
Okay, they're starting to go in.
Okay.
We've got people in all rooms. So that really was the secret. More people, less rooms.
Yeah, I think that's good information.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put that in the notes to feedback for everybody. I don't see anybody alone. Several people that haven't joined.
There are a lot of people jumped off.
Mm-hmm. We had that earlier too. We lost like 30 people each time when we do the breakout rooms. I think when it works, it's people like it. It's the not working part that turns them off. Typical technology.
Yep.
So we're going to be about 5 minutes behind, which is fine. I can go through the ending things really quickly.
And I can do APBS really quickly.
Okay. Well, you only had 3 minutes to start with.
Okay. Amy Flamini was on. She jumped off. She had to go to do something. She said, bye.
Oops. Oh, I'm just going to do this after we're done. I was trying to put the next link in, but I don't want to fool around with the rooms.
Yeah.
We'll have to come back in about 3 minutes. No pop-up. Angela didn't get a pop-up. Darn it.
No, that was right when you put us in and didn't hit send.
Oh, but now it's okay. Good.
Okay, I'm back.
I'm recognizing a lot of names. That's very cool. I'm going to go ahead and bring everyone back.
Yeah.
So that we've got time. So I'm closing the room.
Yeah.
Ah.
Do you want to ask them to put something in the chat box upon reentry?
Mm-hmm. Oh, goodness.
Well, I could have done the same thing. I forget about using the chat box. All right, we should be back.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. We've got.
Yeah, so if you know, again, we're on a tight timeline, and Barbara and I could go on for days with this work. But if you go ahead and enter something about your conversation in the chat box, just to share, that would be great. And at the same time, we're going to move on. We just have a couple more resources we really want to be able to share with you.
So I think that we highlighted that resource that you just went over, the monographs. Critically important for you to take a look at those monographs and have them guide you through your work as you're getting back into PBIS with the high schools. We also want to inform you about the crosswalk. So many of you are using the tiered fidelity inventory, and I should have mentioned that earlier when we looked at the data for high schools in California that are using or implementing PBIS. That number is taken from the number of schools that are using the tiered fidelity inventory to monitor their implementation, because that is one of the key elements of PBIS, is that you are also monitoring the fidelity of your implementation. So what we have is a crosswalk, which means that we have a section on high school that looks at each one of those tiered fidelity inventories, like 1.1 team composition. You'll see there's a high school column about 4 down. And specific now, what does that mean at high school? What contextually, what are those influences that we need to be paying attention to on team composition? So just for example, that one is a big time. You need to make sure that you've got multiple students across grade levels that are working on your team, almost a parallel team that consists of students. So we want to make sure you're aware of that. And as soon as we move on to the next slide, I'll put a link into the California Technical Assistance Center's website so that you would be able to go right to where the crosswalks are. We have them for tier 2 and 3 also. Right now, those are not on the website. We're working on them again, adding some new information, so keep checking, they'll be back. When you get the PowerPoint, the link is there on the bottom, and that's a direct link, but I'll also make sure that it's in the chat box right now as Patty talks about APBS.
And so finally, this is APBS is an organization that supports obviously PBIS, but is a little bit broader, has a research component to it as well. And we have formed a couple years ago a network, and the purpose of the network really was to bring together people who are implementing, high school PBISers because we learned that networking is definitely a preference when talking with PBIS teams in high schools. And so we've pulled together this network, and it's built slowly over time. The other purpose is to facilitate kind of a link. So when we have researchers say, hey, we have a grant and it would be great if we could get a few high schools, we have a way to connect researchers and implementers. The benefits of joining, and it's free. I promise you, I will not pollute your email box. But to join or to be a member, we'll have you'll receive quarterly updates, a newsletter. In fact, one is going out either today or tomorrow, so I'm going to encourage you to sign up here in a minute. We have semi-annual face-to-face meetings, one at the high school forum, and one in the spring at the APBS conference, which this year was in Miami but didn't happen, but next year will be in Minneapolis. And then we do semi-annual webinars. The most recent one we did was on vaping. And then we have a Facebook page, and we allow for, or we encourage you to give us feedback on what topics that you might want to learn more about. And we've heard a lot about rural supports for rural schools. So that's kind of on the works. This is, let me get rid of my chat here. This is how to join. There are multiple ways to join. You can scan the QR code. You can go to this link. You can send an email and say, hey, I want to join. Again, those are the emails that you'll receive unless something big happens. So being said, we've just started a special edition, and we're asking for students who have created something to support students. And so my daughter does film, and so she did a kind of a funny PSA for COVID. Jen Freeman, if you've ever heard Jen, she was at the high school forum. Her daughter recorded some meditations for students to use. So we're going to generate a special edition. But generally speaking, we won't send you excessive amounts of emails. And then this is the Facebook page. And if you just look up here and you go on your Facebook and you look up High School Network or APBS High School, you'll get to the page. And it is specifically for high school stuff. So we try to really keep everything we put up there high school friendly.
So if you look in the chat box, I just put up the URL for going to the crosswalk, for the APBS High School Network, and then also for the website. Next, we want to make sure that, whoops, why didn't that happen? I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the eval link up and it's not going, so maybe Patty could do it. We need to get your input on the evaluation for today. Good input on how it went today, but also the final question is about what do you need as high schools? What is the content that you would like to cover in these 1-hour webinars? We're going to have more of them in May. And I don't know if we'll possibly go into June or not. I know for sure we want to talk about how do we re-enter and how do we come back after this time off. There's a lot for us to think about in high school. So that final question is, what is it that you would like to have us talk about or bring to you? In closing, we just want to make sure that you are, I keep trying to send that link and it keeps, there it goes. It finally went. That we want to make sure you know about the recognition system for PBIS. We're not doing it the same way as we have in the past because of the fact that we're ended school and we didn't get to do our tiered fidelity inventories. We are going to be instead doing California PBIS Community Cares, where you're going to be able to highlight different things schools have been doing during this time and make sure that we share that across the state. On April 27th, the 1-hour webinar is all about the recognition system and what we're changing for this year. Really recommend you do that so that we can share information across the state on what's working. Another place to do that is to keep the date of September 21st and 22nd for our California PBIS conference. We're looking for exemplars across the state, so you can submit proposals. Again, when you get to the slides, the link is right there for submitting a proposal. They're due by May 29th. If you've got a great implementation with your link crew, something great going in tier 1, you've moved into tier 2, whatever you might be having, if you would want to submit a proposal there, we'd love to have you present. We have more webinars coming up for the rest of the month, and you can get to those by going to the PBIS-CalTAC.org website, current events, and you'll see all the events, particularly as we go into May. And when you go to the next slide, you'll see that we have a couple of dates set aside for high school in May, May 6th, and we're going to talk about evidence-based practices. A couple of you said we're new, we need the practices, and so we're going to talk about those. And then we're going to talk about one particular practice, and that's the power of the high school matrix on May 20th. So you're going to want to be sure to sign up for those. Watch for the email to come out from the coalition. That's the PBIS-California.org. Again, current events is where you'll find this information. Hold the date for the conference. And we want to make a special thank you to the Santa Clara County Office of Ed, and particularly to Stephanie Tague, who was the brainstorm, the vision behind launching these series of webinars. We would like to also thank you. One more slide. From the California Technical Assistance Center on PBIS, that was Christy Klaus and myself and Patty working with us from the National Center. Thank you very much for today. Any input you want to put in the chat room, throw it in there now. Please do that evaluation so that we can get your thoughts.
And I was asked to put this back up so you can join that network.
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody. And if you want to save the chat for yourself, there's 3 tiny buttons or dots next to where you enter a chat. If you click on that, it allows you to save the chat to your computer.
And then know that it takes a couple of days, but we have a girl who's going through the chats and pulling out just the content. And we're rewriting the chats, and they'll be up in that resources page on the PBIS-California.org website under resources in the folder for today. We're down to about 26 people.
Yeah, do you want me to put the evaluation back up?
Yes, please. I think, unless somebody says, we want the other one.
There we go.
There we go. Oh, I could put that URL in here too. Let me do that. Those of you still on, I put the URL.
Recording, Barb.
Pardon me? Oh yeah. Hit stop recording.